Hey, I'm super glad you came back to the channel today because we are going to talk about an area that we really haven't covered in depth, and that's going to be southeastern Missouri. Moving to southern Missouri is the best thing I've ever done for my family. More specifically, we're going to talk about West Plains, which is truly the biggest metro out east, and it is the hub that many counties go to for all of the essentials that any city provides, which is like education, healthcare, great shopping. All of that you can find in West Plains. And we encourage clients to look out east, especially when they don't have a really dire need to have proximity to Springfield, because it is a good, I want to say about hour and 40 minutes or something from Springfield. Probably if you drove faster, it's an hour and a half. But yeah, if you don't have dire need for proximity to Springfield, then looking out east is actually beneficial, and for a couple reasons. First thing is that the land values are often much lower, especially once you get outside, the farther you kind of move outside of West Plains. Like if you're willing to live 30 minutes outside of West Plains, you can find land for much more affordable. You can find homes for much more affordable. And so that, of course, would be an incentive. If you want the biggest bang for your buck, the farther you move out east, you're going to find. Now, we do warn against moving too far east. And why you shouldn't move too far east also might actually kind of be the same point as why we do encourage people to, which is that it gets very remote and rugged. Now, that is an incentive to look for affordable land out in southeastern Missouri. If you're okay with it being remote, very low population density, far and few between neighbors, things like that, sometimes not having cell phone reception, although you can get internet through Starlink, you might not have consistently very good cell phone reception. But on the flip side of that, a negative can be it's really remote. And another thing is that as you push farther east, there's definitely a depressed economic viability there. And we do feel that there are pockets of not just poverty, but also probably not just meth use, but meth production. People talk about the Irish wilderness and jokingly say if you cross into someone's property, you will have a gun drawn on you. We have never had that happen, although I know, as crazy as that sounds, that's actually kind of the rural community I grew up in. You do not trespass, and you would have a gun in your face. And I know that that's absolutely insane, but for those of you that are not used to very rural areas, I want to be honest so that you don't get shot. Now, West Plains is not that. West Plains is a very it's just that perfect mixture where you're not sure if you should call it a really big town or a really small city, that kind of sweet spot. And what I love about it is the older generations in particular are so sweet and so innocent, and they literally are like a time capsule of an era that feels near gone. Such sweetness. Absolutely amazing churches as well in West Plains. So for the most part, West Plains has just this really unique feel of something that feels very old-fashioned, but is almost large enough where you would call it a small city. I also just want to go way back in time because I thought it was such a fascinating piece of history. I love history, by the way. And I also like exploring alternate history. So the stuff that's not in the books. But anyway, so during the Civil War, West Plains was near razed to the ground, literally burnt, destroyed. And I thought that was so crazy because I had read that there wasn't formal battles in that area, particularly West Plains. And there wasn't. But there was so much guerrilla warfare that West Plains was near destroyed, and being the seat of the county, it absolutely altered in a negative way the entire county, which is Howell County. So just a very fascinating piece of history. And I always think it's interesting when areas are completely destroyed and yet there's almost this just resonance of an area where people build it back. And I always think that's fascinating. And honestly, if you go to West Plains, you would never know the history of the Civil War there. And in this video, like I usually do, I'm going to give you, some pros and some cons. And I like to be incredibly honest because I believe that honesty can better equip people to make good decisions. And I think it's right. So a con that I want to bring up is that and you know what, actually I could be wrong, but I think it was 1982 or somewhere around there was a pretty devastating tornado that hit West Plains. And I always talk about topography and how those hills break up the tornadoes. West Plains does have a nice amount of hills around, and certain areas are hillier than others, but hey, it's kind of in the name, West Plains. Plains usually being like bottomland and very, very flat, and there's parts of West Plains that are very, very flat. And there was, I believe in the 80s, there was a tornado that did extensive damage. Now, nothing even close to what happened in Joplin, because Joplin, if you look at it, way flatter. I mean, you can't really even see hills. You can see trees, but that's deceiving because that's not topography. So I want to be honest, if I didn't have a very strategical lay of land and I was moving to West Plains, I probably would want a storm shelter. Now, I'm getting to the place because no matter what your opinion of the why is, we're having weather events that are unprecedented. And even though we are so protected, we are on a hillside, we are protected, the storms don't even come here half the time. We are so strategically, in terms of the topography, we're very safe where our home is. And I still am actually contemplating putting in a storm shelter here just because the brave new world is becoming very strange. So if I was moving to West Plains and I was in one of the flatter areas, I would want either an amazing basement that was kind of structured as a storm shelter or an actual storm shelter. Now, would I be so afraid of tornadoes in that area that I wouldn't move to that area? No. It's now Joplin, and I'm so sorry, people from Joplin, that is a hard no for me. Just because that severity of tornado, it even took out some storm shelters. So for me, that's not comfortable. And I probably wouldn't move into the tornado alley into Oklahoma. It's just not for me. Now, I do not live my life with fear, but I do have a bit of a strategic mind, and I do like to be pretty calculated. But that was a singular event for West Plains, and really was not anything compared to what we think of as a very bad tornado. So that is really kind of the only negative I would say about weather or weather events in that area. And for most of it, it actually didn't affect it because it has some nice rolling hills. And I actually love the topography of West Plains through some of it because it actually reminds me a little bit, in the parts that are rolling hills, it reminds me a little bit of Highlandville, but you could almost buy 2 times the amount of land and property than you could in Highlandville because the price point is so much higher in Highlandville. And there's just some amazing natural features in that area that make the East incredibly desirable. So West Plains and natural scenic beauty, it's off the charts. You have some of the best rivers, of course Jack's Fork, but you are also very close to the Current River. You have the best springs, all throughout, through Shannon County down to Howell, throughout Oregon County. You have some of the biggest and best springs in the entire country. I think some of them are even competitive for the entire world. How special is that? The aquifers are huge and pristine and amazing. So your groundwater all throughout there is also notably good, in terms of actually a global scale, right? And then you have Norfolk Lake, which is one of the most beautiful, pristine lakes. And I've actually mentioned it in previous videos. I think it's so special because you don't have the party vibe of pontoons with slides and people perhaps drinking. It's just the sweetest vibe with grandpa out there fishing with his grandson. Not to say there's probably not people that party on the lake, but I've never seen it, and it just seems like the most idyllic, mellow, quiet, pristine lake that I think I've ever seen in my life. And with all that natural beauty, you have amazing, huge swaths of state land, conservation land. And here in Missouri, you can actually use our state and most of our conservation land. So you can hunt it, you can hike it, people get firewood, they clear trails. The amount of use that people get out of these public lands is something that I've never seen coming from California. And it's quite common that you can find property with close proximity, some of the times even butting up against these lands. And it's like, cool, like I just bought 40 acres and I've got 15,000 or 30,000 free acres to use in my backyard. And that's pretty cool. Now, one reason that I really recommend West Plains when people don't need that proximity to Springfield is also because it's a big enough hub that you can get a lot of your needs met. So first we'll talk about education. So in the West Plains School District, like actually in the city proper, has 5 different schools, and the rankings are fairly good. So, roughly half of the students are testing above proficiency levels in each subject. Now, it is nowhere near the ranking that like Fordland, for example, in Webster County gets. And I have talked about how just like amazing Fordland is. And the reason why is because just this all-star superintendent came in and literally revolutionized like that entire district. And they are now out competing like every school, like almost every school in Missouri. Like they are ranking so high. But for our area, other than Fordland, West Plains actually ranks fairly well for their public schools. And conversely, there's actually quite a thriving homeschool scene. One of my next videos is going to be all about homeschooling in southern Missouri because we have a very, very special and thriving homeschool scene here. And I would say that especially because of the size of West Plains, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of groups, and would technically make the homeschooling experience, if you're looking for kind of external activities, much more easy. But probably the most unique aspect of education in West Plains is that the second largest satellite school of Missouri State University is there in West Plains, and it's actually an amazing campus. I had to do some classes as a teacher. I used to be a public school teacher, and I was really impressed. And it's really cute. It's small. It has a nice little footprint, right in kind of the middle of the town, but it's not so big that it completely dominates the culture. I'm sure many of you have known or lived in a place that becomes like a college town or college city, and it can be actually really detrimental. Even though there's obvious economic benefits, I would say that there's a lot of cultural issues with having that energy. But another thing that I really like about the MSU campus in West Plains is it does have a bit more of a conservative bent. You have a lot more of like ag focused degrees, even like vocational certificates, and a little bit less of like arts and humanities. Not that arts and humanities is bad. Ironically, I have a liberal studies degree, so I'm not completely trying to destroy that, although I would never do that again. If I could do it again, that's not the degree I would get. But I think that the fact that the campus has much more of a focus on kind of hard skills that one can really actually help local industries, like actually are beneficial for the local industries that are in West Plains, which makes more sense to have young people coming up in a skill set that is beneficial for humanity. So that's good. And I think though that the culture of the campus definitely feels a little bit more conservative and a little bit more practical than some of the campuses I've been on across the country. Another important thing to talk about is healthcare, because I talk a lot about like really if you need healthcare, you kind of have to be close to Springfield. But I actually want to push back against that a little bit. There are some great small clinics all sprinkled around. But if you need specialized care, that's where I just think that metros obviously have the best specialized care. But if you are willing and don't have the need to be right close to Springfield, I think West Plains is great because it does have a viable healthcare system. And for example, like at Ozarks Healthcare, you will find some specialized fields. I mean, they do some oncology, they do pediatrics, they do orthopedics, heart care. And I was even surprised with some of like the gynecological stuff. They even will do like gynecological surgery and some like specialized care there. So I just want people to realize that there is enough of a healthcare system there that you can get a lot of your needs met. And if you have something incredibly specialized, it would be about an hour and a half to an hour and 45-minute drive to get to Springfield, where, I mean, pretty much every kind of care you would need, you can find in Springfield. And another thing about healthcare in West Plains is there's some great doctors who just have private clinics and private offices. We went through actually a really hard thing where my daughter had these ingrown toenails, her large toes on both foot, and it was actually like devastating. Like she would start to play a sport and then be crippled in pain. And being into alternative health, I mean, we tried everything from like internal, external, saunas, detox, cutting away the skin. I bought all these special tools for like, I don't know, 2 or more years. We tried everything that I could think of. And I literally spent hours and hours researching ingrown toenails, which had never been even on my radar before, until it hit our family, and it really affected her. Like every sport she ended up having to quit because of the pain of these, or at least during that period of time, every sport had to be quit because of the pain. And we actually found, and I kind of did my research and even was looking at Springfield, and we found a doctor in West Plains who that was like his specialty, and he was amazing and he did a great job. And he put up with my daughter. We had to go 2 times because she was so afraid. Bless her heart. Because she's, had never had a shot. She was freaked out about shots, which I realized was like, that was not good. So she was so scared because it was a very, very fat, deep needle that had to go in really far. But we eventually got it done. That doctor was so patient and so funny. He just cracked jokes. Like for 2 days that we tried to get it done, he just cracked jokes, and we finally got it done, and he did an amazing job. And he actually had higher reviews than the doctors I had found in Springfield. So just to say, sometimes, especially for like weird niche things, those small doctors are so like, especially if they've been doing it for like 40 years, they're incredibly knowledgeable and specialized. And so I just don't want to knock the rural doctor, even though in past videos I have really bigged up Springfield healthcare. There is some amazing doctors and hospitals in some of these smaller areas. So we used to drive an hour and 15 minutes to go to West Plains every week because my daughter was taking horse lessons there. And that's actually kind of the next point I want to make now. I know this is also very niche, but if you or your children are into horsemanship, rodeos, anything like that, doing advanced clinics for any of that knowledge, then West Plains is an amazing place to land. The horse scene is awesome. And what's cool is a lot of the teachers that are actually have students, they're still competing. They're still competing across the country in rodeos or different competitions. And those sometimes make the best teachers because they're actually in the game. West Plains has just an awesome rodeo scene. So you've got your amateur rodeos and you've got some pro, and then you've got like the college circuit. So there's so much going on there. Now, I know that most of you are like, yeah, I don't care about the rodeo. But for some of you, or I have a lot of clients who have family with younger children that are going to follow them out. And if that's for you, you should know that there's just an off the chain horse scene there. And if your kids, grandkids, whoever want to get into that, there's some amazing teachers, which we've really, really struggled to find incredibly knowledgeable teachers in that realm. And that's why we were driving an hour and 15 minutes to go to West Plains, because it is a good scene there. We are going to wrap up this video with both a pro and a big con, and it's going to be all about government. So to start out with the pro, okay, Lisa Durnell was just elected in 2024 to be the representative for Howell County. I forget her district number, but she is amazing. She is such a good woman and has such a level head. That area is so lucky because she's also not just there to kind of either build her career or kind of just to like have this experience where she goes through the motions of it. She is active, she is tenacious, and she truly cares about preserving the morality of Southern Missouri. I could not say enough good things about Lisa Durnell. On the flip side, I don't want to be overly negative, but I just want to say my perspective. I believe that the mayor of West Plains, Mike Topliff, and every single one of the city council members needs to be replaced ASAP. And the reason why I say that is because they allowed a drag show that was so openly sexual and that was also so openly inviting children. So literally all of their media, it looked like it was a children's fair. And it was like free face paints, free food, like come get loved, drag show, awesome. And for those of us that were paying attention, we were absolutely horrified that that was happening in such a sweet, small area as West Plains. I believe how it came to be is that the majority of like the older folks who I just so lovingly talk about in West Plains are completely out of touch with even like what any of this movement is. In fact, I talked to one old lady who literally was like, what is a drag show? Like, I do not know what that is, which it's almost like you're confronted with trying to describe the birds and the bees to your kids. Like I'm looking at a sweet old lady and I don't even know what to say. So there was that. And then another thing is that I just think that so many people are so busy that they're not paying attention to really what a lot of people are doing who have a lot of time on their hands. Now, for some of you, you might be like, hey, chill out. Like, what's up with you? Like, you're a bigot? You don't support transgender people and gay and lesbian rights and whatever else. And I would say, actually, it's kind of not true. I come from California. My sister's a lesbian. I love her. One of my closest friends in college, my roommate and one of my closest friends was transgender male to female. I've been surrounded by that culture my whole life and I do not judge. Where I draw the line is that whether you're straight, gay, transgender, or identify as a furry animal, if you are providing sexual content and explicitly trying to bring children into that content, targeting children to be present, to be really sexualized, I do not support you. So one example I gave to show that this isn't coming from a bigoted place is that like the pictures that I showed the mayor and the city council, if they had any feelings of like protection and preservation for like the innocence of youth, they would have had such a problem with that event and what was happening at that event. Unfortunately, they all told me straight to my face they had no issues. They had no issues, they had no plans on taking any action because all I was asking for was something similar to what Branson did, which is specifically say 100% you can have those events. They're protected by the Constitution, but they are for 18 years and older. That inherently drag shows are sexual, which, oh my gosh, look into it, people, like sexual. And that is not fit for children to see. But my point was, if straight people were doing it, like if there was this big event and it looked like it was like fairy face paints and all this great stuff, and it was a bunch of like OnlyFans, or strippers or whatever, and they were, having this event where they encouraged children to come and they wanted to teach them how to be go-go dancers and what a great, career it was, I would have just the same problem with that. So my problem is not what adults consensually do with other adults. It's about sexualizing children. And I was absolutely appalled that the mayor of West Plains and every single one of the city council members has no problem sexualizing children using taxpayer dollars to do so. So it's going to be something I revisit. I believe that we probably will need to work on a ballot initiative because the people will vote to protect children in that area. It is conservative. And if you are moving to that area, man, I encourage you to get involved. All we need is a handful of awesome people that understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, that I am not coming from a bigoted place. They understand. We need you to come to Missouri and actually replace some of these fake conservatives and fake Christians, because some of us that are moving to this area are even more fiery than the locals. Now, would that stop me from moving to West Plains? No. And in fact, I wish it wasn't so much of a drive, because I probably will be part of a political campaign there, and it's going to be a huge pain. It's going to be really challenging. And I believe it's God's work. It would feel so good to do that work, to reinstill some values. And actually, ultimately, I even thought about it. Like, I would like to find some local transgender drag queens that understand the words that are coming out of my mouth and actually work with them to help to create a piece of legislation that really does protect their rights and also protect the rights of children. So that's my kind of weird fringe con, but it became so much part of my life. I feel like I would be lying to you guys if I didn't talk about that. So in that whole weird situation where I was, somewhat confronting the mayor and the city council, what I found out is that the locals are amazing. And especially with Lisa Durnell now, I just think that there's going to be great things that come to that area. And one of the positive things about the whole kids at the drag show thing, it really woke up the community. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if there's not a movement there that was really inspired through that darkness that will bring us amazing light. So as always, you guys, I wanted to bring you guys a super diverse video with like the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's real. I also wanted to kind of just briefly touch on just the wide variety of factors that make West Plains absolutely incredible. Whether or not you end up out east, I want you guys to go check it out when you guys get here, just so that you can see that area. Like I said, the natural beauty off the chains. And like I said, the natural beauty out there is next level. As always, y'all, I'm thankful that you stuck around. I'm always thankful when you subscribe and you like the videos. It definitely helps me. And my information will be in the description. I'm here for you when you guys need. And if any of you are realizing that the next phase of your life, the best phase, is going to be here in Southern Missouri.